We are back and have another options flow list as well as some dark pool activity that we're tracking. Charlie, hope you had a great 3-day weekend. How are you? And happy Father's Day.
Thank you very much. It was relaxing and it was nice after OPEX to have that 3-day weekend. We found some good flow today. Let's jump right into it, starting with URI.
Yep, URI. So let's just jump right in. Sometimes after a larger OPEX, it gets a little dicey. You want to see where they position URI. They came in with some larger put activities. Surprisingly, going out to 915, the 370 puts, you have 2.29 million behind that. And Charlie, one of the things that caught my attention is if I actually went to historical, this is not a name that sees a lot of activity. I have this filtered here to show a million and above outside of the arbitrage player. Love to hate the arbitrage player, but outside of that, you don't have much that comes into that name from a call or put perspective. So worth keeping on watch considering how rare we see activity here. They do report on July 26th. That's an industrial name. And while we had some put activity there, we also had BA, another industrial, but also came in at a good spot, bull risk reversal coming into the 721, 215 calls, and not a bad position here considering they didn't go very far out of the money. So when they came in, spot price was 212.81 with 1.29 million and a bull risk reversal. They're opening a call, writing a put. And so they wrote the 215 puts, collecting 1.5 million. Nice spot there. You have the Paris conference this week, so could potentially get some commentary out of that. And it's nice to see some of these bull risk reversals because interestingly enough, this could actually be an ER run-up. They report July 26th. And we saw quite a few of those today, a few ER run-up potential names going to jump right into Amazon. More size here as they came in another bull risk reversal.
Bull risk reversal. You're going to hear that name a lot tonight.
Yeah, and well, as a side note, while we're not really coming in and going over a lot, we are going to do a series over some of the multi-legs and different option spreads, particularly around some writing that will give you more insight and backdrop. So I don't want to spend too much time tonight, just want to mainly run through some names, but I'm excited about that, Charlie, because we see those debit call spreads, bull risk reversals, and sometimes those are where it's at.
They have been money lately, and we did well off of them. I'm excited to get that series out. We're going to have T. Lambden join us on that, so very exciting. Yeah. And love this Amazon trade.
Yeah, no, he's a rock star with those and kind of breaking that down and understanding more of the analysis behind some of those spreads, looking at cost basis and a little bit more insight. But this Amazon, yeah, 721, 126. And what's more interesting is how close to the money they came into this one. So when they came in with 3.68 million on the 721, 126 calls, riding the 126 puts, you're really close to the money there. They wrote the puts with 3.39 million, looking to collect that. So there's bullish and then there's bullish.
Really bullish.
Yeah. Surprised to see that.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It's surprised to see that coming off of an OPEX. You and I have done this, several times to where whether it be a regular OPEX or a quarterly quad witching, flow can get a little dicey after that because you're looking for new names and where they look to position because you had so much roll off. It seems like we're getting that this time, surprisingly, relatively quick. We could certainly jump over into NVDA. While some of what we've looked at has been closer in the money, at the money, NVIDIA 100 points out, positioning into
100 points out.
535 calls. They were a bit relentless. I mean, they didn't just come in one time. They originally started coming in this morning. originally paying 672, jumping all the way up to 725. IV also did jump 48 to 49. Did want to just add a little bit of context here. While I definitely like to be able to look at IV, something that you have to take into consideration is that this is 100 points out of the money. You're not going to see an IV increase if you were looking at, per se, a Carvana for a weekly that may have a line item come in at 120% IV, and then the second line item come in 45 seconds later and jump 20 points to 140. You're looking at two different things. You've got to kind of also take that in consideration. Not only did we have a little bit of time here with going out to 818, you're also 100 points out of the money. But interestingly enough, because there was a bit of a divergence today, wouldn't you say, Charlie? You've got NVIDIA A18 535s. This closed at highs today, but didn't necessarily see that across the board, right? AMD?
Right, AMD, yeah, some call writing in AMD and out to next week, which is interesting. Last week they were hitting NVIDIA to the long side and call writing the 136s, 132s on AMD ahead of that event they had. This week, or today rather, the 4,222 contract, I'm sorry, 6,001 contracts at $4.22. They collected 2.53 million, and they wrote the 118s for next week. While they're still betting NVIDIA upside, they're betting on some stall or some downside a little bit in AMD. So definitely some divergence there in those two.
Makes it difficult because usually the semis will run together. So a little odd considering what we have seen typically. Maybe NVIDIA, after that guidance, has kind of carried the sector, and then you get a little bit of a shakeout with really where they want a majority of their positioning. We will see. But Tesla, damn, Tesla.
Tesla, I've got that. I need a virtual hug. So, you know, last week with the video we talked about that. I think the 295s and maybe the 290s, definitely the 295s. But then Friday there was huge monster bull risk reversal again. We talked about that twice tonight. And the 260s for 721, which did catch ER, which I think is 718 or something like that. So it catches ER, and I bought the bull risk reversal last week, sold way too early. I made decent money off of it, but sold it way too early. And now they're coming in and doing shenanigans again. So go ahead and walk through that.
Yeah. So if it wasn't enough to kind of see all the positioning that we had kind of as a prelude into this, we have the 721, 315 calls. That's going to give us ER coverage. So of course you tend to see a little bit more of that outlandish positioning. But you know, they really did come into size with some size. You have over 3 million here into the 721, 315 calls. And you're right. I think we should definitely do a welfare check on the 630, 295 players, because it did seem like suicide positioning at the time, and they are still in. So we're talking about some activity that came in last week that we mentioned on our previous video. This was 613, and if you recall, it was quite out of the money because spot at that time was trading and just under 260, where the original interest was in the 290s. It was not as notable size as it was into these 295s. And I'm going to use the BBS OI tracker. It's going to be this little graph icon on the far right under IV. And that day on 613, they had 11,000 trade in volume. You did have an increase of 9,100 in open interest, which you would expect. You're always going to kind of have those people that kind of ride the coattails of any larger positioning, but a majority of the original interest that we saw is still in, and there has been a continuous add so far. Volume today 6650 versus a 10,000 OI. Now, one thing that I will also like to mention that we definitely don't see often is TSLL. Charlie, you know that one? TSLL?
Yeah, I learned it today. 1.5
Old dog?
That's so long. So
Old dog?
yeah, I learned that one today. So that was definitely interesting flow and good catch there, Mel, too, by the way.
Yeah. So you don't see this one very often. And while I'm on the stock side, I'm going to add the ETF because, old dog, new tricks here. Like this is something that's newer. This came out last year. They started to come in and position into some leveraged individual name ETFs, particularly Tesla, NVDA, a few others. I can't say that I've closely monitored it because I'm a flow watcher and you don't see a lot of flow there, but TSLL 1.5 times leveraged Tesla bull. Right around lunch, they came in to the 630 $20 calls when spot was at 1841. Sweeping here with just under $240,000 with some tack on. So that definitely started to increase, as well as contract price 60 cents, 65 cents, 70 cents, and IV. Now, one thing that I'll mention is I haven't personally traded this and I don't know the spreads or how liquid it is. And I wouldn't necessarily advise, especially a newer trader, if you're trading commons, this may be a little bit more difficult to get in and out of. From an options perspective, if you're trading commons, this may be your jam, but also just more from a sentiment perspective, since you don't see much into TSLL, 1.5 times Tesla leverage, and we know that we have some positioning. Tesla may be just starting to get her groove on. She could be a wild child.
She can, absolutely.
All right, so we've wrapped it up with a lot of the options flow, but we do like to combo up these videos to kind of just really wrap our arms around everything that we're seeing from a money flow perspective, not only your options flow, but also some of that dark pool activity. And Charlie, I've got to tell you, like, wow. XLF, 20
You're not kidding.
million shares. Oh.
That was we talked for an hour tonight, this evening, and then again tonight, so probably an hour and a half total, and this is one of them that really caught our attention. We talked about last week how a lot of times you'll see big dark pool into the ETFs, and then individual names will usually follow. And we had the K-Web last week, and was it not XLY, it's XLP or something that we had traded off those videos. Both those did very well. And now here you are, Mel. Go ahead and talk us through this XLF.
Yeah, so I have to kind of say I've been kind of eagle-eyeing and catching this. XLF is not stranger danger. They tend to see a lot of the larger positioning. We are about to have financials report, and so XLF to kind of see size ahead of financials reporting is nothing unusual. But I have to say, I think in and of itself, let's go through a few. 20 million shares, I think, is the largest I've seen in anything, probably even including some of your $1 rare penny stocks, but also for an ETF. And while I have seen 10 million, and that was jaw dropping in and of itself into XLF, this 20 million is just kind of getting me going. And to kind of add to the fact that we've seen it in KRE. We have not seen it in XLF. So while we've had some jumps here and there, and we've seen some regionals start to kind of catch a move ahead of everything else, I've been kind of wondering, like, why are you not active here in XLF? And to kind of go along with that, you have quite a bit coming through in some of the individual names. Going to highlight the WFC with 3 million shares, Verizon with 9.6 million. That is some serious size. I would like just to add one thing. XLF, the top holdings have been updated. You have BRKB at 13%, JPM at 9%, Visa at 8%, MasterCard at 6%, and then you drop to Bank of America at 4%. Something to keep in mind, there was some sector changes to where the financials, specifically speaking, Visa and MasterCard came out of XLK and actually came into the financials. So perhaps you're seeing some volume because of that, but also interesting to note that you do have that update, and that has actually gone through in the XLF. But if that wasn't enough, you're just kind of across the board with some larger size. I would suggest everybody take a screenshot. These are kind of like my hand selected. It is a bigger report. I've just kind of skimmed it down. Do want to kind of mention PayPal. You had relative strength in the financial tech names. STNE, we mentioned this one on our last video after we had a 3 million share dark pool print. We have not seen any options flow, but I was able to get an early entry actually going out to 2024 and then layering that with a July position. Again, this is strictly off of the activity we saw from a dark pool perspective, as well as a technical setup. But you also have USB, VFC, BAC, DFS, Goldman with just shy of 1 million shares. You don't see a lot there. So I think it would be worth your while to pay attention to the XLF space, particularly for an ER run-up and also for potential sector rotation. Anything else, Charlie?
That was it, Mel. Got some good tickers, dark pool and options flow, and enjoyed this very much.
Yep, nope. So coming off of an OPEX, going to be very open to kind of where we can see some gyration, some new names. Love new names. We'll also be posting that on our Twitter. We are at Florenzics_. Hope to have you guys join us, and we'll send some updates as we see them. Thanks, Charlie. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mel.